When I go to sleep, sometimes I can visit the dream factory. At first, I really liked it. I had never experienced lucid dreaming, but being in the town of the dream factory felt so real, and I was in total control of myself, so I assumed it to be just that. A very lucid dream. It is a stunning place, really. I grew up in the southern Spanish coast in a small town right by the beach. But due to work and the general economy in Spain not being very prosperous at the time, I left my sunny home country for a cold and depressing German metropolis. Don't get me wrong, I like it here. It took me a long time, but I learned the language, I get along well with the people here, and my job pays a lot better than anything I could have hoped to earn back home. I originally assumed that these dreams were caused by the yearning I felt for sunny beaches, since the recurring dream is set in a coastal town with a very Mediterranean flair. The houses are all white, with colorful window shutters and doors. They are arranged in a stair-like fashion and have big balconies. On the main street small, touristy shops and restaurants that emit seductive scents are surrounded by tall palm trees, and you can hear small parrots chirping. The setting was so peaceful and cured my Heimweh, my homesickness, to a large degree. I never expected I would come to fear this place so much. Of course, the thing that catches your eye immediately and sticks out like a sore thumb is the factory. The dream factory. That's what people here call it. A massive building sitting partially on the beach, with large tubes going straight into the ocean, and an almost ridiculously tall and thin chimney on top of it. It looks to be made of metal and concrete, and it is covered in either windows or huge lamps in bright colors. Neon blue and bright pink, intense turquoise and blaring red. My first impression was that it looked a bit like a child's idea of an alien spacecraft or something from a cheesy sci-fi movie. I didn't know what the factory did the first few times I was in the dream city. I would periodically get these dreams and used to feel extremely lucky every time I did, the once or twice every month. And at first, all I did was explore the city. I'd talk to the residents of the place and enjoy the warm sand under my feet. I even have my own place there. I just knew where my residence was, like how you sometimes know things in dreams without an explanation. I guess, had I been less distracted by the warm feelings of this beautiful wonderland, I would have noticed the red flags sooner. The people here seemed tense and nervous. Their smiles too big, their friendliness not authentic. When asking someone about the factory, they would exclaim how amazing it is and how grateful they are for it. It drives up tourism, good for business, they said, their toothy grins never reaching their eyes. But what does it do? It makes dreams. But this is a dream already. It really is, isn't it? Unsatisfying answers. Then, I found out for myself. I had been having these intense dreams for close to a year until I experienced it. Usually when I came to the dream city, it was a bright and sunny day. Not this time. It was evening. The sun was setting, painting the sky in stunning purple and pink hues. I was on the main street and all the shops and restaurants were closed. I couldn't see a single person. That is when I noticed that the balconies, reminiscent of the ancient Colosseum in a way, were full of people. They huddled together, looking out in what I assumed to be anticipation. I joined them. I entered my house and went onto my balcony. The balconies to my left and right occupied my somniac neighbors. I heard hushed whispers and a lot of shushing. The siren startled me so much I almost let out a scream. A high-pitched, unpleasant noise that lasted for far too long and made my eardrums hurt. Pain felt so real here. And then the spectacle began. Clouds began to escape the chimney of the dream factory. Strange, almost gummy-looking clouds. Strange, almost gummy-looking clouds. They started out as white, but then they shifted color. The first ones turned bright yellow, and then they began to quiver. They started vibrating as they descended slowly due to their weight. I focused on one cloud in particular. It began to take shape. I recognized the shape of a rubber duck after a while. The cloud had turned into what looked like a pool floaty or maybe a balloon. I was mesmerized, and suddenly I was a child again. The clouds kept coming and took on all sorts of shapes. Cute animals, all with a rubbery texture, slowly floated from the sky down onto the ground. They seemed to be bouncy. After what felt like hours, the entire ground was covered in colorful ducks, crocodiles, unicorns, and many more adorable creatures. Next to the buildings and on the street, you could tell they were huge. I looked at the people around me with glee, but they didn't share my joyful expressions. They stared at the animals on the ground with an off-putting intensity. Some seemed to hold their breath, and in their eyes, I saw unmistakable fear. What was I missing? I couldn't tell back then. The sirens sounded again, and everyone suddenly exploded into a roaring applause. I looked around and people were hugging each other, chatting excitedly. Every hint of the unpleasant atmosphere they emitted only seconds ago was wiped off completely. Things were good again. That's how it went for a while. I kept having the dreams every now and again, but it was never evening again. I didn't witness the spectacle of the factory for a long time. I regret telling her so much. In real life, I had a close friend, Irene, a wonderful woman. She was kind and open-minded, and I could talk with her about anything. She was my actual next-door neighbor in the apartment complex I lived in, and that's how we met. One day, I decided to tell her about my dreams, thinking she would laugh or maybe not even believe me. But she listened intently and eagerly and told me how lucky I was to be able to experience this so often. How it was like a mini vacation and how jealous she was of me. That she never dreamed anything remarkable. The next time I dreamt of the beach town, she was there. She couldn't believe it, neither could I. We sat down at a beautiful cafe and ate delicious food, talking for hours. I woke up to a banging on my door, and when I groggily opened it, there was Irene. She sputtered out words I could hardly make out in my dazed state, and it took me a while to comprehend what she was saying. She had actually been there. She could recite the conversation we had had and told me about how delicious the food had been. That it hadn't felt like a dream, but real. She could still remember the taste of the dish she had eaten. I think some sort of fried mackerel. It was very difficult to come to terms with. She seemed over the moon, but this revelation scared me a little bit. I wasn't particularly religious or spiritual, and I didn't believe in paranormal events or magic. So how was this possible? I remember coming up with ridiculous ideas in my mind to rationalize what had happened. I came to the unsatisfying conclusion that we must have had extremely similar dreams by pure chance, and she was inspired by the stories I had told her. Something felt wrong, and I made up an excuse to get her out of my house because I needed to think. Dread began to take over, and I couldn't help but think of the townspeople. How scared they were of the factory. I wouldn't have thought of putting this out on the internet, though, if it wasn't for what happened next. Something very unexpected. The same night, the night after my encounter with Irene, I dreamt of it again. And the sky was purple. As I made my way to my home in a rush, I again encountered Irene. She was upbeat but confused and told me she too had just gotten there and if I knew what was going on. I wordlessly grabbed her wrist and dragged her with me to my apartment. I knew something bad was going to happen. I knew the alarm would sound soon, and I had the feeling that if we weren't on the balcony while it happened, that things would take a bad turn. The same thing happened as before. The alarm sounded and the clouds began emerging and soon taking shape. Irene was cooing over the event, but I, admittedly in a rude manner, told her to be quiet. She hesitated but obeyed. The clouds were flowing out of the chimney. Something about them so threatening in spite of their innocent designs. It didn't go like last time, though. The clouds didn't float to the ground. The wind carried them towards the balconies, and I knew this wasn't good. This was wrong and bad, but I didn't dare move a muscle or make a peep. My eyes caught onto a floating rubber ducky as it was coming straight at us. My grip around Irene's wrist got tighter, and it must have hurt, but she didn't say anything. Her eyes fixated on the menacingly floating entity that was rapidly approaching us. There was nothing I could do as I watched the yellow rubber come closer and closer, and when it crashed into my friend with a surprisingly strong force, I shut my eyes as hard as I could. I shouldn't have let go of her, but I felt the need to hug my own body tightly, to let me know I was safe, even when I knew the opposite had to be true. The screaming began. The floats hadn't just crashed into our balcony. I opened my eyes and quickly scanned for Irene and saw her stuck onto the duck like a mouse in a glue trap. She tried desperately to get away, but the more she thrashed, the more she seemed to fuse with the creature. It had her. And I soon realized many people were trapped in a similar fashion. A lot of the floats had managed to crash into the spectators, and they were in a similar predicament as my friend. That's when the alarm sounded again, and everything took a turn for the worse. The floating animals which previously appeared inanimate suddenly seemed to be more conscientious. They were no longer drifting along through the air. With their prey securely stuck on their bodies, they moved with a horrific precision and determination, taking course to where they came from. Accompanied by terrified screaming and the desperate wailing of those left behind, they floated back to their home, somehow squeezing back into the chimney, breaking the bodies and crushing the bones of their captives as they forced them down the small chimney. I could do nothing but pray that she had been dead by then, suffocated by the sticky rubber that she clung to, hopefully. The next few weeks are a blur. I tried to contact Irene, of course. I didn't know any of her family members, and none of our other neighbors were really close to her. Of course, the first thing I did was knock on her door for what must have been hours. Trying to keep my composure, but breaking into tears every now and again, just to reassure myself I was being ridiculous. I left a note on her door. After a few days, I called her job. That was the only information of hers I had, but they hadn't seen her, and the person I talked to told me her boss was quite furious. I thought about calling the police for a welfare check, but I was so scared of what they would find, and it paralyzed me and prevented me from doing anything. It was only when the smell started that I knew I had no choice. I couldn't lie to myself any longer. Irene wasn't on vacation, she hadn't moved out, and she was not simply ignoring me. I was questioned by the police as I had been the one to report her missing and brought up the smell of decay coming from the apartment. I was questioned by the police as I had been the one to report her missing and brought up the smell of decay coming from her apartment, but after the coroner was done, there was no suspicion on me. They told me her death was a natural cause. I don't remember much of what they had told me, but her brain is just somehow shut off. I think they claimed it was an aneurysm. I don't like the Dream Factory anymore. I don't want to return, but there's no way of stopping it. I fear the dreams have increased in frequency too, though there hasn't been a new spectacle from the factory since Irene's death. I don't know what to do. Maybe someone here can help me? I've been falling down a rabbit hole in research sleep-related deaths and unexplainable aneurysms and similar conditions, and if my amateurish research has been accurate, I think cases of people dying in their sleep unexpectedly and mysteriously is increasing. No one in the dream world will talk to me about anything other than pleasantries. I think they are in the same predicament as me. Please, if anyone here has any information, or has been to the same dream world, or maybe recognize anything from my story, please message me or leave a comment. Anything. I don't know if I will be lucky enough the next time. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. A quick shout out to my patrons, Old Penguin, Rinku Star, Melissa Perez, Icy Narrates, Seven Cities Journalist, Cupcake Hips, Eric Cifuentes, Alonso, Austin My Love, Ellie Hutmeyer, Jesse Hartley, Lawrence Wallen, Mr. Sankofa, and William Hartley. I always try to link a different charity in the description, so go ahead and check that out. I'm also going to start having more things on my Patreon soon, so keep your eyes peeled. And as always, I'd love to know how I can be praying for you, so go ahead and drop a comment and let me know how I can do that. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in the next video.